Hello, my creeplings. I'm back. It's time to discuss yet another millennial horror. I guess I realized how much I missed out on when I wasn't watching new movies in the 2000s. And I guess I'm just gonna say it. I'm jumping in head first, even though it's kind of unintentional. For those of you who don't know, and I know I've mentioned this here and there, I get a lot of my movies from the library because, to be completely honest with you, unless I know what I specifically want to watch, I'm not browsing through a streaming service. I'm not spending 4 hours trying to figure out what the fuck I want to watch by staring at a screen and clicking through versus, I'll go to the library and I'll look at the DVDs, and if, a title strikes me, and then I pick it up and the cover art looks interesting, then I flip it over and the blurb looks interesting, then I'll pick it up. It's like going to the video store, but my library doesn't have the huge selection that a Blockbuster or a Hollywood Video would have had, but they've got a decent one. Their horror selection, surprisingly enough, for a public library is quite nice. Coming from the girl that grew up in a small town that had mostly family films and how-to instructionals as offerings at her public library. So, but then again, I was lucky enough, my aunt ran a video store, but we've mentioned that before. So, yeah, there was a point in the 2000s where I was, catching some new horror in the theaters, or I was renting it occasionally, but that's when my husband and I really kind of, jumped into the superhero genre and a few other things, and that's kind of what our focus was at the time. And I'm realizing now I missed out on a lot of, pretty decent to really good films that I only caught in bits and pieces here, and this is one of them. This is Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon. I did all that tangent just to tell you I found a new movie at the library. This was directed by Scott Glosserman and written by Scott Glosserman and David J. Steve. Released March 12th, 2006 at the South by Southwest Film Showcase. This is a black comedy slasher film. It is set up like a documentary. This very much feels almost like this is Spinal Tap type of mockumentary until the very end. The cast list, there's a few very noticeable names, and then the rest are relatively new to the scene actors at the time. Like Nathan Basil plays our lead person, the Leslie Vernon character. I looked at his IMDb, and he's only been in 3 feature films and a handful of, TV guest starring appearances. I don't know if he never got his feet underneath him or what. He's pretty good in this, I'm not gonna lie. But he also wasn't, oh my god, this guy is going to be a star level of charisma. Same thing with Angela Goethals. She plays Taylor Gentry. Kate Lang Johnson is our girl Kelly. Chrissy Carlson is one of our other girls, Lauren. We got a girl named Jamie, played by Bridget Newton. Ben Pace is Doug. And Britton Spellings, is Todd. Hart Turner is a character named Shane. There are, though, some really important names for some of the cast list. We've got our character Doc Halloran, played by the one, the only Robert Englund. It's nice to see him on the not killer side of a character. And strangely enough, I know this is weird, y'all, but I keep forgetting, seeing him outside of the Freddy Krueger makeup, he's actually a very handsome man. But then again, I'm the girl who's got Ted Raimi and Vincent Price on her wall. So that could just be the macabre me talking. But yeah, I tend to forget how good looking he actually is, because I see a lot of his stuff where he's underneath makeup. We have a appearance by Scott Wilson as the character of Eugene. My zombie fans know Scott Wilson from The Walking Dead. He played Urshel, and I loved that character. I was pissed with what happened with that character. I mean, spoilers for how many years, we all know he dies. But I was very upset with how. I loved his portrayal, and if you look at his IMDb, the man's got a list of credits, so we know he can do some heavy lifting. We also have 2 cameos you want to watch out for. Little Zelda Rubinstein, I say little as in stature, from many a horror movie, but mostly known from the Poltergeist series. She plays a librarian in this. And then within the first 10 minutes, we get a cameo from Kane Hodder. Doesn't speak, but he glares at the camera as a resident of Elm Street. Which is kind of funny once you think about it. For those of you who are not aware, Kane Hodder is one of the stuntmen / stunt actors who has played Jason Voorhees in the Friday the 13th series. I believe he's done the most appearances as Jason. I have seen him at horror cons. Actually ran into him at a bar at one of the horror cons in the hotel after hours. Very sweet man. I highly suggest, if you have the time and the money at a con, to get in his line. He's a very nice guy. I say sweet, and it makes you think, oh, he's so sweet. He's a very personable dude. Like I said, I ran into him at a bar in the hotel after hours. You know, apologized for staring, because for a second I didn't figure out who he was, because, you know, 1, I was in the bar, so I was drinking, and 2, you see so many faces in a day, sometimes your brain kind of goes a little blank. But after I got over there, I said, you know, hey, love your work, you know, love that you do these things. And, you know, he was very gracious and said thank you, but I let him go on his way. So, okay, so any of you, okay, I'm going to go off on a slight tangent here because I brought this up. Those of you that have been to conventions, Comic-Cons, horror cons, whatever, and you run into the talent outside of con hours, so like, in the case of the horror con I've been to, they have the convention at the hotel where they keep the talent. So you're apt to run into the talent going to breakfast in the morning, or, you know, going to the vending machine in the middle of the night. So the question is, how do you handle it? Do you just kind of try not to stare and be like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god? Do you have a full fanboy, fangirl moment, or do you try to play it cool like I did? I've not met too many people that I've gone to cons to see outside of the con. I actually only had 2 interactions that I can say were full like I had a conversation with somebody interaction. And, you know, I respect the fact that they are not on. This is not their clocked in time. But, you know, you do want to say thank you for, you know, putting your work out there. I admire your work, etc., without being a big dweeb. So, yeah, let me know in the comments down there how you handle that. But let's get back to this movie here. Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon. We start out with a documentary team made of Taylor Gentry. I can't want to say Gentry. I think it's Gentry, though. And then her 2 cameramen, Doug and Todd. They're doing the setup spiel, basically the opening narrative to this documentary. It sets the tone for the film, and the fact that This film treats our immortal slashers, Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers, Freddy Krueger, etc., as actual things that have actually happened. They are actual active serial killers. They're kind of vague about, whether or not the supernatural shit is happening, but they definitely, this happened in Springwood, this happened in Haddonfield, this happened in wherever. So, yeah, wherever Camp Crystal Lake is located. So, they are doing a documentary on a guy who claims he is Leslie Vernon, who claims to be the subject of a local urban legend. When he was a boy, he supposedly became possessed by evil and killed his parents, and the townsfolk basically mobbed him and threw him over a waterfall and left him for dead. So he's claiming that he is a child that survived the attack, and they meet him at the current house he's living in, and he starts walking them through, what he's doing without actually getting to the nitty-gritty of what his motives are. Now, I'm going to give you a slight headache, nausea warning here. The shaky cam in the beginning is pretty bad. I get, they're going for documentary handheld camera, but dude, seriously? You couldn't have gotten a gimbal or something. I think that's what they're called. You couldn't have gotten anything like that? Because I get motion sick with some of these shaky cams. Like, I love the Blair Witch Project, and we may talk about that someday. But there are some points where I have to just close my eyes and listen to it because I feel like I'm going to hurl. The shaky cam is so bad. And this starts off with not so nice shaky cam. So, Leslie plans to orchestrate a killing spree around his family home, i.e., where the urban legend happened. It's a rundown farm in the middle of nowhere. Classic slasher film setup. Yes, this points out all of our slasher tropes, which is, I believe, why this is classified as a black comedy. I wasn't laughing. I was slightly amused, but I wasn't, I was not laughing like I do when I watch The Evil Dead or Evil Dead Part 2 or Army of Darkness. I wasn't laughing for any, like I laugh for those. I did get a good chuckle. I did have a good smile. So, while I wouldn't quite call it a comedy, it's definitely a mockumentary with tongue planted firmly in cheek, winking at you, going, yeah, I know. So, Leslie plans to, the farm is pretty much abandoned. He's already got it booby trapped and such, but he, picks his group of teenagers to slaughter, before being confronted by his chosen virgin survival girl. We don't call him a final girl in this one, they call her survival girl. Which, same idea. I don't know why they didn't say final girl, probably just to break it up enough. So, she's a 17-year-old high school student. Her name is Kelly. She works at a local diner. She, I think, her boyfriend's a football player. They hang out with a cheerleader, another football player, and, of course, 2 stoners. You'll notice we're talking tropes here. But they treat it as if it's this, almost archetypal checklist to have an epic story. So we find out through the course of this that Leslie's got a strict training regime, for high cardio and strength training. Because, once you think about it, if you take the supernatural element out of the question, how would a real person, keep up with the teenagers running and screaming and be one step ahead of them. They'd have to be very trained. They'd have to be high on their endurance, high on their reflexes. Yeah, so I understand this. He's also learned theater techniques and magician's tricks to create the proper atmosphere. He's rigged the farm, seals off exits within the house. He maps possible routes that the victims will take, rigs the electrical system to fail, all kinds. I mean, he's been planning it like a director plans a film, but instead of it being fake, it's all, I'm actually going to kill somebody. He even goes as far as tampering with potential weapons in the barn, sledgehammer loosening the head so it would fall off after the first strike, partially cutting into the axe handle type stuff. So again, they'd fail after the first strike. Yeah, they get a little bit into the psychology of how people behave in situations like this, how it's like just bizarre that they'll herd together, but they won't really protect themselves. They'll trip on level and stable ground. They'll hide in obvious or very dangerous locations. I mean, the Geico commercial. Well, why don't we hide in this shed full of weird sharp things instead of the car? Again, we're talking tropes here. Now, during the shoot, Leslie takes the crew to meet his mentor, Eugene. Now, Eugene apparently was an active killer in the 60s and 70s. And the way when he talks about it, it makes it almost sound like he was a smash and grab killer that didn't get caught. He talked about how Kruger and Myers and Voorhees elevated what they were doing to levels of art. And he elaborates a little bit on why guys like him do what they do. And it's for them to be a sacrifice by acting as evil to counter the point of good. Because there's no good without evil. I mean, I get what they're trying to talk about. But it's No, my brain didn't lock up. I'm just trying to decide if I want to go off on this tangent or not. But let's do it. This will be a quick one. Okay, so you're telling me there, Eugene and Leslie and any guy who's done what you've done, that you are choosing to be evil to oppose good so that everything is in balance. You don't think that's going to happen naturally? Mother Nature likes a balance. So, you didn't have to do what you did. Mother Nature would have found a way. But I'm going to leave it at that. So, they're chatting. Eugene's wife, who's again, much younger than him, and she knows exactly what he is. There's a joking line later that almost hints that she was his final girl, and rather than, her walking off into the sunset by herself, she married her serial killer. Okay, talk about some weird victim circumstances there. They're talking about the mark and the subject and how to start baiting the victim. What's her name? Kelly, excuse me. Taylor's our documenter. I all the names I will admit I kept messing them up because my brain wasn't wiring properly. It's like he said, "Oh, I might kill one of her friends to get her on her edge," and they're like, "No, that makes it too personal, too quick. Is there anybody else, like a janitor at the school or something?" And they talk about it. She spends a lot of time at the library, so they offhandedly, I think it's Eugene's wife, offhandedly says, why don't you just kill the librarian who's, she's there all the time. She obviously knows and is friendly with the librarian. So it would motivate your girl to behave in the way that you want her to, and you get the ball rolling, so to speak. And they think that's brilliant. So, Eugene agrees. And they go to the library to plant a fake article. Leslie plants a fake article in the library's microfiche and leaves a copy out on the table near Kelly. That adds to the legend that this Leslie Vernon was the product of a rape, and it may have been this girl's great uncle. It's all fabricated. It's just to draw her in. And she does, God love her, she does exactly what he predicted she'd do. She finds the copy of the article and wants to read the entire thing, so she goes to the librarian. The librarian's like, we don't keep 30-year-old newspapers around, but it's probably still on microfiche. He switched it out with the fake microfiche. She reads it, figures it out. The librarian elaborates on the legend some more, and at that point, that is when Leslie Vernon in his psycho killer, slasher killer mask and outfit setup attacks the librarian. Now, this librarian is the Zelda Rubinstein character. It's great that we got her as a cameo. And it's probably better for her at the age she was. She was getting near the end, she's getting older at this point. That she probably had one day's worth of work. But I almost kind of feel like it's a waste of someone of her caliber. But again, I'm just happy she's still working at that point. Going back to my notes. So that happens. They, run off and talk about it. At the library, Leslie Vernon's Ahab, that's his term, shows up. It's basically their version of Dr. Loomis from Halloween. That's the Ahab. That's the person diametrically opposed to your psycho slasher. Really patterned after Dr. Loomis. And this is Doc Halloran, played beautifully by Robert Englund. This character was a nice change from what I have seen him play in the past. I know he hams it up as the villain and the bad guy, and I know he loves it, but I actually kind of like his turn as a good guy, going all the way back to the V miniseries from the 80s, and as recently as Stranger Things. So it's nice to see him being able to play both sides of the coin. Leslie won't explain much further than, he's his Ahab, explains what an Ahab is. And they think that that's kind of the end of it for now. Well, the next day, Taylor and crew go to talk to Kelly at her job. For some reason, they feel the need to kind of interview this girl, even though Leslie has told them not to, because it would fuck things up. And they get a little surprised when, Doc Halloran shows up and says, I don't know what he told you, but he is not who you think he is. He is a mentally unstable man named Leslie Mancuso. Halloran treated him in Reno. And then somehow Leslie Mancuso was able to leave Reno and come to this place. It takes place in a small town in Maryland, even though it was filmed in Portland, Oregon, and the surrounding area. And so there's something that happened. They don't really explain it. So there's a little tiff between Taylor and Leslie about Halloran's allegation. Leslie becomes very agitated and aggressive. Taylor's like, okay, maybe we should stop this. But they reconcile and they choose to go forward with the filming. And they're continuing to film the preparations. So they're kind of enthusiastic about, his creativity. Eventually their consciences catch up with them. The night of the murders, they get involved. First they kind of try to talk him out of doing it. Doesn't work. He believes that the survivor girl, again, will define herself by facing him. He's like, okay, if you can't be here and stand aside and film it, just go away. Just go away and let me do this. And, but they ultimately just decide to stop him. Now it switches from documentary to standard horror movie mode, and you literally watch everything unfold in about the order and the way he explained it would, without the film crew involved. Now, you would think with all of this preparation and everything, we'd get some good gory kills. They're not really that gory. Probably because this was a low-budget film. They couldn't put the money into special effects, so they really work on their atmosphere. Very good in that. We do get, I think it's one of the stoners. There's a tool that you put into the ground, and you can, I think it pulls bulbs and tubers out of the ground. I don't know what it's called. I'm not even 100% sure that's what this tool is used for, but he puts it in the guy's chest and pulls out his heart with it and puts it in the guy's hand, which that was really cool looking. I think that's where they blew their effects budget, but it worked. Or at least it worked for me. So they get to trying to help the kids. We do find out in the course of this that Kelly is not a virgin. And with a little more thinking and discussion, we realize that Taylor was always Leslie's intended survivor girl. She was the virgin sacrifice. My words, not theirs. He keeps picking off the group one by one. Doc Halloran shows up as he predicted. He gets got. Was it Todd? Yes, Todd does the stupid thing, smart thing in a way, and leads kind of Leslie off, to get him off, which Leslie did say might potentially ruin his plans. So Todd sacrifices himself so that he could buy them some time, but we still end up, her and Leslie in the final showdown in the shed with the apple press, and then we go to the end credit, or we go to the end where it's Doc Halloran and the other cameraman, Doug. They survived their wounds, and apparently it's over. Now we get the credits rolling, and it's a security feed from the coroners, the autopsy room, and the guy's getting set up and everything. He pulls the gurney out of the refrigerator, and we get the classic slasher charred body sitting straight up. So apparently he's not out of the game just yet. I did like this movie. I was kind of afraid I wasn't going to in the first, 20 minutes when I'm like, oh, this really is, they're really doing a Blair Witch mockumentary type thing. And I had seen some other stuff that had done this before that I just couldn't get into, but I told myself, nope. I've heard good things. We're going to watch this. So, I sat and watched the entire... It was pretty good. I would definitely watch this again. I know I talk about theme nights a lot. That's just kind of how I do movie nights. At my house, with my husband, with any friends that, want to get involved. We'll find a theme and we'll go with it. Whether the theme is as vague as your favorite obscure movie to as precise as Alfred Hitchcock, your favorite between this year and this year. So, again, I'm thinking if you want to do a theme night where you're talking about your big slashers, and, you watch your first Jason movie, which would be Friday the 13th Part 2. You watch your first Freddy movie, you watch your first Halloween, and then you watch this and kind of see how they became cultural zeitgeist. It's an interesting discussion on how the horror slasher genre specifically, they even mentioned Chucky in here for a second, really shaped horror cinema from, Michael Myers to then. And because the first Halloween came out in, was it 78 or 79? It was the very, very late 70s, almost the 80s. And then after that, you got your My Bloody Valentine came out shortly after that, and the first Friday the 13th came out shortly after that. And yes, it's a bit of a formula with these slashers, whether they're supernatural or they're not. Because in the first Halloween, it is not, it's not hinted at that Michael Myers is an indestructible supernatural being, like it seems to, around Halloween 4 or 5. He's just a dude that has just evil behind his eyes, I believe is how Dr. Loomis put it. And, we didn't think there was a motive for killing Laurie. So he was, one of the first ones. And so this kind of takes that idea of these serial killers being mere mortal men to a point, and then applies it to how a real mortal man would do it in a documentary style. Again, this has got my brain thinking in layers that I don't normally go into. So this is definitely a thought-provoking piece. I don't know if it was intended to be a thought-provoking piece, but those of us who are film nerds, storytelling nerds, entertainment nerds who like to dissect this stuff, this will definitely get your juices flowing and the cogs in your brain working. This is a pretty good movie. Like I said, I would watch it again. There's only boobies twice. And the gore's not heavy. So, in all honesty, I would recommend this for older teenagers, if you don't mind the tits being out. And the talk of sex and virgins and phallic symbols and yonic symbols and, phallic symbols being the male symbols and yonic symbols is what they call it, being the female symbol, birth canal, womb, that kind of stuff. They go into some deep, they scratch some deep levels of discussion I have seen in other articles. So yeah, I would definitely recommend watching this if you are a big fan of the slasher genre and how it works. So, Rise of Leslie Vernon 2006, definitely worth a watch. Just kind of an update on things. I started a new job about a month ago, and my schedule is kind of weird for me now, in the fact that before I had a lot of days off. Like, a lot of my days off were days I was home by myself. My husband would be at work, so I would use those to watch movies and film and edit and things like that around doing chores. Well, now I work the same shift or the same days that my husband does. So I have 2 days off a week with my husband, whereas before, if I was lucky, I'd have an afternoon off with my husband or a morning off or something. So I'm having trouble making time for these sometimes, because in addition to the fact that I am not working at the same place, this is a much more physical job, and it is the complete opposite schedule of what I used to be working. I used to be working second shift. I am now working early mornings, and I'm having some trouble adjusting to the sleep situation. So there are some days I'm just exhausted, and then I kind of end up falling asleep, and I then have to play catch up on my chores, and I can't sit and do this. So I'm working on getting myself on a schedule. I had a pretty decent, okay build-up of videos, so that I think I can continue on the every other week posting schedule for now. If this becomes an issue, I may have to think about going down to doing once a month, which I don't want to do. Or it might end up being, sporadic. We'll see. As of right now, I'm really trying hard to get one video filmed a week so that I have variety for what I want to put up. And if something were to happen, I'd have a little build up. Say I got sick or I lost my voice, because let's face it, allergy season here in Ohio, especially fall allergies, that it's murder. Or at least it's murder on me. I have had, to the point where I've been so stuffy I could barely talk. So, that's a little update as to what may or may not be happening with the channel soon. But again, comment, like, let me know what you think. I am more than happy to get into healthy discussions about any of these topics. But on that note, I have a few things I need to do to get the ball rolling on a few other things. So I'm just going to say good night, my creeplings, and say it with me. I'll see you next time. Bye.